Why does it feel like money is always running away from you? It's like the harder you try, the more it slips through your fingers. You work long hours, you hustle, you do side jobs, overtime, sometimes even take work you hate, just to make ends meet. And yet by the end of the month, you're still staring at a near-empty wallet, wondering where it all went. I used to live that cycle. And when I say used to, I mean for years. I honestly thought the only way to get ahead was to work harder, to squeeze out more hours, to grind until I couldn't keep my eyes open. I thought the people who had wealth were just working more than me, or they were lucky. I never questioned the way I thought about money. Here's the problem. If you believe money is something you have to chase, you'll spend your whole life chasing it. You'll treat money like a scared animal you're running after. It keeps running faster, and you keep getting more tired. That's exactly how I lived. I remember waking up already stressed about bills. I'd tell myself, if I can just work a little more, push a little harder, then maybe things will change. But nothing changed. And here's what's worse. I was surrounded by people who believed the exact same thing. They believed attracting wealth was all about hustle, sweat, and maybe a little bit of luck if you were lucky enough to be born into the right family. Nobody ever taught me that there's a completely different way. A way where you don't have to force it, but instead, you draw it in. This isn't about sitting on the couch doing nothing and expecting money to fall from the sky. No. This is about aligning yourself with principles that never change. These principles don't care where you were born, what school you went to, or how much is in your bank account right now. They work for anyone who works with them. I didn't know that. For the longest time, I thought my only option was to do more. But here's the truth that shocked me. More effort doesn't always equal more results. In fact, for a lot of people, more effort just equals more exhaustion. The first time I realized this was during one of my lowest points. I was working so hard that I barely had energy to think, and yet I was still broke. I was emotionally drained, physically tired, and mentally stuck. And it hit me, if working harder is the answer, why are so many hardworking people still broke? That question changed everything for me. I started noticing something. The people who seemed to have wealth flowing into their life effortlessly weren't necessarily working harder than everyone else. They were working differently. They had a certain clarity, a certain alignment. They understood how money actually moves, not just in the economy, but in their own life. When I look back, the turning point wasn't when I found a better job or got lucky. It was when I stopped believing the lie that money only comes from endless hustle. I realized that wealth is attracted, not chased. And you can't attract something if your whole energy, your whole mindset is screaming desperation. Think about it. If you've ever met someone who's desperate for approval, do you want to be around them? No. Desperation pushes people away. Money works the same way. When all your energy is tied up in fear, scarcity, and stress, you repel opportunities. But when you shift into alignment with principles that govern wealth, principles that existed long before you were born, you start pulling it in without force. Now let me be real with you. At the time, I didn't know any of this. I was just a guy trying to survive. My days looked the same. Wake up late, work just enough to get by, maybe try some small side hustle, and then scroll on my phone or play games to escape from how stuck I felt. I thought I had an income problem, but the truth was I had an alignment problem. And once I learned to align myself with principles that never change, principles written into the very design of the universe, that's when things shifted. The crazy thing? These principles are not hidden. They're right there in the Bible. They're written in the way creation works. They're confirmed even by science. But most people overlook them because they're too busy grinding and hoping for a miracle. The moment I started practicing them, money stopped feeling like something I had to chase. It started showing up in ways I couldn't have planned. Opportunities appeared. Ideas came. People connected me to things that fit perfectly with my skills and passions. And it wasn't because I worked myself into the ground. It was because I finally understood how to attract wealth instead of running after it. So if you've been chasing money and it keeps outrunning you, if you're exhausted from working harder but still ending up in the same place every month, I want you to hear me when I say this. It's not about working harder. It's about aligning with principles that never change. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I went from chasing money and getting nowhere to attracting it effortlessly, even when I was broke. Because once you learn this, you'll never look at money the same way again. Wealth responds to alignment, not desperation. That's the principle that changed everything for me. And when I say changed everything, I don't mean just my bank account, although that definitely shifted. I mean the way I think, the way I live, and the way I position myself in the world. Before I understood this, I was constantly operating from a place of need. My decisions were based on what I lacked, what I feared, and how quickly I could fix my situation. But desperation is repellent. It pushes away the very things you're trying to pull in. Alignment, on the other hand, is magnetic. Let's be clear. Alignment doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. It means putting yourself in a position where what you do naturally multiplies because it flows with how God designed life to work. The foundation of this principle is as old as creation itself. In Genesis, God's very first command to humanity was simple: be fruitful and multiply. Notice the order. Be fruitful, not do fruitful things first, not have fruitful possessions first. The being comes before the doing and having. In other words, fruitfulness starts inside before it manifests outside. And this is where so many people miss it. They focus only on doing more or having more, but they skip the inner alignment, the being. If your mindset, beliefs, and daily focus are not aligned with fruitfulness, you can work yourself into the ground and still see little to no lasting results. I learned this the hard way. There was a time when I was broke, financially, mentally, and spiritually. I thought the only way to escape was to force it. Work harder. Try more side hustles. Grab every opportunity, even the ones that drained me. But no matter how much I did, my results didn't change. I was stuck. Then something shifted. I stopped chasing opportunities and started working on alignment. I asked myself, am I thinking like someone fruitful? Are my habits matching the future I say I want? Am I speaking words of abundance or words of lack? And slowly, I started aligning my thoughts, my words, my actions, and my environment to the principles that create fruitfulness. I noticed something amazing. Opportunities began finding me. People started connecting me to resources and projects I didn't even ask for. Money began coming in from directions I didn't expect. It wasn't because I suddenly became lucky. It was because I was finally walking in the same direction as the flow of fruitfulness God had already set in place. Think about it this way. Imagine a river. If you're desperate, you might start paddling frantically in random directions, exhausting yourself in the process. But alignment is like pointing your boat in the same direction as the current. You still paddle, but the river does most of the work. You move faster, with less resistance. That's what wealth attraction feels like when you're aligned. It's not forced. It's supported. It's multiplied. And the Bible confirms this over and over again. The principle of sowing and reaping is about alignment. You can't plant apple seeds and expect mangoes. You can't fill your mind with scarcity, fear, and doubt, then expect a harvest of abundance. The harvest matches the seed, and the seed is your being. When I was broke, my seeds were fear, self-doubt, and constant worry. No wonder my life produced more of the same. But when I shifted to planting seeds of gratitude, vision, generosity, and faith, things began to change. What's powerful is that you can begin aligning yourself today, even if your external circumstances haven't caught up yet. You don't need $1 million to start thinking like a steward of wealth. You don't need to be debt-free to start speaking words of abundance. You can choose to align your mindset, your words, and your actions with fruitfulness right now. This is why the be, do, have principle is so important. Most people live, have, do, be. They think, once I have more money, I'll do better things, and then I'll be happy, generous, and fulfilled. But it doesn't work that way. God's order is be first. Develop the mindset, faith, and habits of a fruitful person. Then you naturally do things that multiply. Then you inevitably have the results. So here's the truth. When you're aligned, you don't have to force wealth to come to you. You attract it because you're living in harmony with the principles that govern it. And this was my turning point. The moment I stopped obsessing over how broke I was and started focusing on being the kind of person who naturally attracts and multiplies resources, everything began to shift. Not overnight, but steadily, surely, and in ways that didn't burn me out. Wealth isn't a chase, it's a result of alignment. And alignment begins with who you be, not what you have, and not just what you do. Now that you understand the principle that wealth responds to alignment, not desperation, the next question is, how do you actually align yourself with it? Here's the exact step-by-step framework I used when I was broke, stuck, and tired of forcing results. These steps are simple, but they require consistency. If you do them, you'll notice that opportunities start finding you instead of you chasing them. Step 1. Shift your inner identity. Be, do, have. You can't attract wealth with a broke identity. I had to stop seeing myself as someone who struggles and start seeing myself as a good steward of resources. This wasn't pretending, it was aligning my inner self with how God already designed me. In Genesis, God said, "Be fruitful and multiply." He didn't say, "Wait until you have money to start thinking fruitful thoughts." Fruitfulness starts with being. Every day, I would ask myself, how would a wealthy, generous, and fruitful person think, speak, and decide today? Then I'd practice being that person in small decisions, whether it was saying no to wasteful spending or yes to opportunities that aligned with my calling. Step 2. Speak the language of abundance. Your words carry vibration and direction. Proverbs 18, verse 21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." When you're constantly saying, "I can't afford this," or "I'm broke," you're planting seeds of lack that your life will eventually harvest. When I was broke, I stopped saying I can't afford it. Instead, I started saying, how can I create the resources for this? That simple shift turned my mind into a problem-solving machine instead of a limitation machine. Step 3. Create a vision that pulls you forward. Desperation pushes, but vision pulls. I wrote down in detail what my ideal life looked like. Not just the money, but how I would live, give, and serve. This gave my mind something to focus on beyond just paying the bills. Habakkuk 2 verse 2 says, "Write the vision, make it plain, so he may run who reads it." I read my vision daily until it became more real to me than my current struggles. Step 4. Surround yourself with fruitful environments. Your environment either reinforces your alignment or destroys it. When I was broke, my environment was full of people complaining, gossiping, and reinforcing scarcity thinking. I had to change that. I began listening to people like Myron Golden, Bob Proctor, and successful business mentors who taught principles of wealth from a place of service and stewardship. I intentionally cut down time spent with voices that discouraged growth. Step 5. Sow where you want to grow. The principle of sowing and reaping works in every area. If you want financial increase, be generous. If you want opportunities, help others succeed. If you want knowledge, invest in learning. When I had very little, I still set aside something to give. Sometimes money, sometimes time, sometimes skills. Every time I did, doors would open. It was like activating a law that was always there but needed my action to trigger it. Step 6. Align your actions with multiplication. You can't say you want abundance but keep putting all your energy into activities that only pay once. When I was broke, I started focusing on actions that could multiply, like selling products online, creating content, and learning skills that could pay me over and over without trading more hours. This is the difference between working for a wage and building something that compounds. The first one depends on your time. The second one depends on systems, leverage, and value creation. Step 7. Practice gratitude before the harvest. One of the fastest ways to align with wealth is gratitude. Even before I saw big results, I started thanking God for the small provisions. An unexpected sale, a bill paid, a new connection. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's working, and that draws more into your life. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, "Give thanks in all circumstances." I learned that gratitude isn't just good manners, it's a magnetic force. Step 8. Stay in the flow and keep adjusting. Alignment isn't a one-time decision, it's a daily recalibration. Just like a river has currents and bends, life will present challenges. The key is to keep checking. Am I thinking, speaking, and acting like the person I want to be? Some days I drifted back into desperation thinking, but because I knew the steps, I could pull myself back quickly. Over time, the drift became less frequent, and the alignment became my default. The beautiful part? When you do these steps consistently, wealth attraction stops feeling like this uphill, exhausting climb. It becomes natural, almost effortless. Not because you're doing nothing, but because you're moving in harmony with principles that never change. When we talk about attracting wealth effortlessly through alignment, it's not just a modern-day mindset hack. It's a principle that's been demonstrated for thousands of years. The Bible is full of examples of people who aligned themselves with God's design and saw resources, influence, and opportunities flow toward them, often against impossible odds. Joseph, alignment through faith and stewardship. Joseph's life didn't start in comfort. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely accused, ending up in prison. But here's the key. No matter where he was, Joseph aligned himself with God's principles of faithfulness, integrity, and excellence. While in Potiphar's house, he managed resources well and increased value for his master. In prison, he used his gift of interpreting dreams to serve others. This alignment positioned him for the moment. Pharaoh called him to interpret a troubling dream. Joseph's solution not only saved Egypt from famine, but made the nation richer. Pharaoh gave him authority over the entire land. Joseph didn't hustle his way into that position. He aligned his gifts and character with God's plan, and opportunities flowed to him. Alignment through wisdom and generosity. Solomon didn't ask God for riches or long life. He asked for wisdom to govern well. This alignment with God's heart brought him more wealth than any king before or after. Because Solomon valued wisdom over immediate gain, he became a magnet for resources. People traveled from distant lands to hear his counsel, bringing gold, spices, and precious stones as gifts. The lesson? Wealth flows toward those who focus on higher values, wisdom, service, and stewardship, rather than chasing money directly. This is the very principle we talked about earlier. When you align internally with fruitfulness, external resources follow. The Proverbs 31 woman, alignment through diligence and multiplication. This woman is a clear example that alignment is not passive. It's intentional, strategic, and consistent. She buys fields, plants vineyards, creates goods for trade, and runs her household with wisdom. Notice she's not trading every hour for money. She's building systems, fields that yield crops, merchandise that sells, servants she manages. Her wealth flows because she's aligned her skills, relationships, and resources with multiplication principles. She doesn't operate out of desperation. She operates out of preparation and stewardship. And because of this, her merchandise is profitable, and her household has no fear of the snow. The common thread. Fruitfulness starts inside Joseph, Solomon, and the Proverbs 31 woman all lived in different times and circumstances, but they had this in common. They were fruitful first in spirit and mindset before their wealth became visible. Joseph was faithful in small places before ruling a nation. Solomon sought wisdom before riches. The Proverbs 31 woman planned and multiplied before enjoying comfort. This mirrors Genesis 1:28. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. The order matters. You be fruitful before you do the work that multiplies, and only then do you have the results. Most people reverse it, thinking, once I have money, then I'll be fruitful. But in the kingdom, it starts with being. How this applies to you. If you're broke right now, your first task isn't to figure out how to hustle harder. It's to align your thoughts, words, and actions with God's fruitfulness principle. Just like Joseph, you may be in a small or challenging place right now. But your alignment can open doors you never knew existed. If you're already making some money but feel stuck, consider Solomon's example. What if your next leap isn't about more effort, but about seeking higher wisdom? And if you're managing a household or business like the Proverbs 31 woman, maybe the key is shifting from working for every peso to creating systems and assets that multiply without constant effort. Alignment isn't mystical, it's practical. It's choosing faithfulness where you are, valuing wisdom over quick gain, and building systems that keep producing. It's speaking life over your finances, sowing seeds in the right places, and managing your environment so that your vision stays alive. The same God who aligned Joseph's path, Solomon's wealth, and the Proverbs 31 woman's success is the same God who said to you, Be fruitful and multiply. He hasn't changed, and neither have his principles. Wealth doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to alignment. And the moment you decide to step into that design, you'll start to see opportunities, resources, and people moving toward you instead of away from you. We've gone through the principles, the stories, and the examples. And by now, you've probably noticed a pattern. It's not about chasing money. It's not about working yourself to exhaustion. It's not even about being in the right country, market, or industry. It's about alignment. The moment you align with God's principles of fruitfulness, wisdom, stewardship, and multiplication, you position yourself where wealth, opportunities, and influence naturally find their way to you. This isn't just a motivational idea, it's a law, just like gravity. It works whether you believe it or not. But when you choose to believe it, you accelerate the results. Why most struggle without realizing it? The reason most people stay stuck in a cycle of lack isn't because they're lazy, it's because they're misaligned. They may be hardworking, but they're planting seeds in the wrong soil. They may be smart, but they're ignoring God's design for how wealth flows. Think about Joseph. If he had let bitterness over his brother's betrayal take root, he would have missed the chance to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Think about Solomon. If he had asked for quick riches instead of wisdom, the world would never have heard of his prosperity. Your results are a reflection of where you're aligned. The inner always produces the outer. The be do have order. Remember, Genesis didn't say, have fruit, then be fruitful. It said, be fruitful and multiply. First, you be aligned in your thoughts, values, and faith. Then you do the work that multiplies. Only then will you have the abundance you've been chasing. Most people reverse the order and wonder why they burn out. They try to do before they've learned to be, and they chase having without the maturity to sustain it. That's why many who suddenly get money, through luck, inheritance, or even hard work, lose it just as quickly. How alignment shows up in real life. When I learned this, my life completely shifted. I went from playing online games until 3 a.m., waking up at noon, and barely getting by, to being intentional with my mornings, setting aside time for prayer, study, and vision work before anything else. I stopped seeing work as time for money and started seeing it as alignment for multiplication. I made small but intentional changes in how I spoke about money, how I handled opportunities, and how I invested my energy. And the results? Customers started coming from places I didn't expect. Connections opened that I didn't have to chase. Sales started coming in even while I was asleep. Your turn to step into alignment. You might be thinking, but I'm broke right now. How do I even start? Here's the good news. You don't need money to start. You need alignment. Start with what's already in your hands. Your skills, your network, your time. Commit to being fruitful in the small things. Speak life over your situation instead of reinforcing the struggle. Study God's principles on stewardship and generosity. Because the truth is, God doesn't need the economy to change for your finances to change. He just needs you to align with the kingdom economy, where the laws are constant, unshaken by inflation, politics, or markets. The challenge for you. So here's my challenge. For the next 30 days, intentionally align your thoughts, words, and actions with the principle of fruitfulness. Stop saying, I can't afford it. And start asking, how can I afford it? Stop praying for just enough and start thanking God for more than enough to bless others. Like Joseph, stay faithful where you are. Like Solomon, seek wisdom over quick gain. Like the Proverbs 31 woman, build systems and assets that multiply. When you do, you'll find that attracting wealth isn't a grind, it's a flow. If you've been chasing and hustling with little to show for it, maybe it's time to stop forcing and start aligning. Because wealth isn't hiding from you. It's waiting for you to step into position. And when you do, you'll finally experience what it's like to attract resources, opportunities, and abundance effortlessly.